What should our attitude be to the violent protests erupting in cities across the United States? Just in the wake of a pandemic that has disrupted and ravaged the world, including the United States, we now have another pandemic on our hands. Pandemic is rooted in the Greek pan meaning all, endemic meaning people, all people. Why it applies only to disease and infection, I'm not sure. But anything that affects all people is considered a pandemic. So technically, we are now, at least in the United States, experiencing another form of a pandemic. This one is far more man-made. So what should our attitude be? So I want to break this into two parts. The short, immediate reaction and action, and the longer term, the bigger picture. Under immediate and short term, there's no question anyone seeing the video of Mr. Floyd being pinned down by a policeman to the point that he was killed, clearly asphyxiated, whatever they'll determine, is an outrage. We're all appalled by it. It doesn't matter who does it. There's law and order. There's the dignity of life. And here a life was taken from Mr. Floyd, and there's absolutely no justification. It's a travesty. Our hearts and prayers go out to his family, to his community, and the loss and death of one person is a death for all of us. And there's no justification. So we're not going to in any way justify that, give excuses. Does that mean all peace police are brutal? God forbid. Police have saved lives, continue to save lives. This policeman or the others that were involved need to be prosecuted. The law and order is one and for one and all. The question is, what is our reaction supposed to be to that? We can be outraged, we can be angry, but is violence the answer to violence? Is crime the answer to crime? Absolutely not. That just perpetuates the lack of law and order. This policeman has to be prosecuted and be brought to justice in the fullest sense of the word. But absolutely no right and no room for violence, responding to violence. Someone just shared with us how their store that they built up on Madison Avenue in Manhattan was looted last night. You see it on camera. It's tragic. Just breaking in without any restraints. What is this? Allowing people to vent their anger? There are ways to vent. We live in a land of law and order. And if an injustice happens, it needs to be addressed. So the first thing we need to know is that we're all subject to rules, to guidelines. That's what keeps the civilization in place. The Mishnah says it this way in the Ethics of the Fathers. It says, were it not for the fear of authority, police, government, one person would swallow up another. That is why we need to have judges and we need to have police to enforce it. And there should be no laxity in any way. There are ways people want to protest. There are legal, legitimate ways to do so loudly, prominently. This country, you can assemble and protest, but that crime should be allowed to go rampant. I think this is pretty obvious to anyone. And any type of justification or trying to turn this political, one way or the other, some saying this is Republicans, this is Democrats, either way. Trying to cover up police brutality? Absolutely not. But trying to cover up other crime because people are justified to express their anger, we have to let them vent. Let them go to a therapist to vent. You want to protest? There's ways to do so. Not through violence, not through looting, not through thievery, not through creating a world that now is becoming, in addition to the pandemic, which was bad enough, that we have to now deal with these fears and these concerns. Now there's another part to the picture, the bigger picture. What is all this a symptom of? When things happen, we have to look at ourselves introspectively. As we've been discussing about the pandemic itself, the coronavirus, the Corona-19 pandemic, We have to look at ourselves and introspectively soul search. The thing that comes immediately to mind is the timing that this happened. We're just coming from celebrating the 3,332nd anniversary of Sinai, the revelation at Sinai, which became the event which shaped civilization. The Bible, the Torah, the moral code was the mandate given to us by God, how to live our lives, a blueprint for life. And this became the basis, obviously, of the Jewish faith, the Christian faith, the Muslim, and essentially now accepted internationally, globally, as the principles, the Ten Commandments, the principles, which define a healthy civilization. It breaks down into something called the 7 universal Noahide laws, which are essentially the 10 commandments with some variations. And they cover everything. They cover from the beginning, which is there's a God, there's a higher authority, an eye that sees and an ear that hears, that we are accountable to. We're not here on our own. We can't just do whatever we like. And then it's followed by the protection of life, do not murder. And by the protection of property, do not steal, which includes looting, of course. And by the protection of sanctity of relationships, healthy sexual relationships, not exploitive ones, not inappropriate ones. Protection of the environment, protection of wildlife, being sensitive to every form of life in this world. The specifics is not to be cruel to an animal by eating of a limb of it while it's still alive, but it really broadens into the whole context of respecting other forms of life. And finally, to establish laws, houses of justice. Yes, courts, laws that we follow. If we had these 7 in place and people followed it, we would have that world that everybody aspires to, a world of peace, a world of no famine, a world of love, a unified world. So all this happening and breaking out, these attacks, these riots, these protests, violent protests, literally in the last few days when we celebrated this anniversary of Sinai, I mean, it's so glaring and obvious. What we need is to go back to the basics. And the basics begin as the first of the 10 commandments is, I am your God. The God that took you out of Egypt, out of Mitzrayim. Then it follows the laws. The laws are very rational. Do not steal, do not murder, do not covet. So why do we need to have that first statement, I am your God? Many people accept the rational moral laws of civilization without God. No. But as our founding fathers recognized very fully well, though they were deists and they believed in the separation of church and state, yet in the Declaration of Independence, what does it say? All people are created equal. It says all men are created equal, meaning all people are created equal and endowed by the Creator with inalienable rights. By the Creator. Why would they use a word creator and created? It was easy. It would be easily state. You can easily say, all people are born equal. All people are equal, endowed by nature, endowed with inalienable rights, because they understood that if it's left in any way ambiguous and not spelled out, then someone can always say, you have these rights, but we can also take them away from you. The majority can take away the rights of the minority. But if it's the Creator, none of us are creators. We're all creatures. We're all part of the creation. So this means it's inalienable. It can't be taken from you because it was not given by, that cannot be taken by anybody from you because it was not given by anybody to you. It was given by the mere fact it's our birthright. In the words of the Bible, we were created in the divine image. Yes, every one of the 7.5 billion and counting people on this earth created in the divine image, and as such has fundamental inherent rights. The dignity of life is the beginning of them all, of liberty, of freedom, pursuits. And there is a system of law and order to make sure, to maintain and preserve the integrity of that dignity. So when you see what's going on, whether it's coming from the police department or any individual, or coming from those rioting in the streets, burning cars, looting and breaking into stores, hurting the property, damaging the property of innocent people, driving fear. They're forgetting one thing, forgetting the fundamental principle: we are not here on our own. We're accountable to a higher authority. Without that, all other morality becomes arbitrary, moral relativism. Let's just go back 80 years ago. A very highly sophisticated people with philosophy and music and art and literature and science and medicine decided that they're going to play God. They decided which human beings they considered to be negligible, to be vermin. And they went on to murder them. Why? Because they forgot the first commandment. If you don't have the God, the foundational, unwavering principle that we are not gods ourselves, that we are not self-made, but we were put here for a purpose and a mission, then you can always determine no murder, no problem. But I have my conditions. I have my exceptions. I murder people who I don't think that are equal to me, or they're not people in my mind. That's when we forget the first commandment. So when you see what's going on, it has to be a wake-up call that we need to return to that foundational element. That yes, there's a creator that endowed us with rights. And we have no right to take that right away from anybody else because we're all part of that creation. And just as the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, has taught us that we have to look inward because our outer structures and institutions have been exposed to be fragile, to be unreliable, even though we thought they were indispensable. And what did that teach us? To look inward, to realize there's an inner life, there's deeper elements to life than just our entertainment and just the material comfort zones that we were so used to in our schedules and our plans and our summer plans, our work, even schools. So too this tragic outbreak, which on one hand, you'd want to hope that the pandemic is so much beauty coming out of human beings, nobility, kindness, volunteerism, people risking themselves for the life of others. You'd hope that it would point out the beauty in everybody. But we're seeing an ugly side. But you know something? There's an expression in the book of Daniel that says, in the end of days, another blessing will happen is that there'll be a clarity. Things will be exposed. It's much better to see an evil, to see something ugly than not to see it. Because if it's camouflaged, you can convince yourself it's beautiful. You can go into denial and think, hey, everything is nice, or pretty much nice. So this exposes a rift and exposes a void that needs to be filled by all of us. We're all collectively responsible and individually responsible. Not just for the police brutality, we're responsible for that too, and for the response, which is equally criminal. To rise up and say, we are all here under one God, one authority, who placed us here and given us the right, the dignity of life, and not to break the law, not to hurt others, not to hurt others' property. No matter how angry you are, there have to be healthy ways of expressing that. These are the thoughts that come to mind when we see these fires burning in our cities. Where are our leaders? Where are our visionaries? Where are any form of leader getting up and saying that moral clarity? Because it's clear. There are things that are right and there are things that are wrong. The things that are wrong have to be called out, no matter who did it, whether it's a leader, whether it's a police officer, whether it's a government official, whether it's a business leader, whether it's an entertainment person. And the same thing has to be called out when you see people responding in ways that are absolutely unacceptable. And we're not just talking about criticizing, we're talking about the alternative of re-embracing the basic foundations of civilization, those 7 laws, based on the 10 commandments, all based on that there is an authority that we answer to. We are accountable human beings. Are we fulfilling our mission in life? We were sent here. Life is a gift. You were sent here to fulfill an indispensable role that you and only you can fulfill, and that is to take your corner of the world, the material part of your universe, and turn it into a home, a divine garden, Are we living up to that? Are we perpetuating that message to our children, to our families, to our communities, and to everyone out there? That's the question we should be asking right now. God should bless us all, that we should have the clarity and the wake-up call and recognize that this is a time in history that will be looked back at, and the question will be asked, what did you do?